At this year's Fly-In Cruise-In, a beautiful car was on display, a 1954 Buick Skylark. I'm with Ed Blinn, and Ed, you just got this car out of the shop. You've been working on it a long time. Where did you find this rare car?
About 25 years ago, I was working in California, and I found this ad in a newspaper about this guy was selling his old cars because he was moving back to Arizona. They made very few of these cars. I believe around 800, close to 900 cars is all it was ever made. Very few parts were ever made for the car. So they just cannibalized one car to fix the other ones. And this was kind of the bones left over of a nice rust-free car. Very bad shape, but it had no rust. It had always been in Arizona and California. But all of the parts on it that made it a Skylark were missing. So I purchased it because I was going to make a custom Skylark street car. I probably got it in 88 or 89, brought it home. It's set in a barn for almost 15, 18 years. I finally decided that due to they had come back in popularity and value that I ought to make an attempt at doing a complete restoration on this car rather than making a street machine out of it. So I began to search for parts over 10 years ago. The main problem was there was no taillight housings whatsoever available for this car. The car's trim pieces were all made out of pot metal, which after 50, 70 years just reverts back to Mother Nature. So I began the quest of doing a CD scan of some original parts to have them made. Well, there I was at step one. In the meantime, I had started a restoration on this car in my body shop about 7, 8 years ago. Total frame-off restoration. Of course, it was pretty easy to do the chassis and the motor and everything that was available, and a few used parts because they also fit other years of Buick. I happened to find a guy in, I believe, Oregon. He had a car like mine, and I went to see it. He had several rough used parts that I was looking for.
There was just 2 years this car was made. Why only 2 years?
They were extra expensive. They made them in 1953 in a different body style, about 1,200 of them. Then in 54, they made 800 to 900 of them. And after that, they just quit making them. That's the only years they ever made the vehicles in. So it really limited anybody to find anything for these vehicles.
Were they all convertibles or were there some hardtops?
They were all convertibles. I had the car done a year ago, but I had to put some different backup lights in it, and I would not take it to a show or take it anywhere till I got the original stuff. Finally got a pair of these made out in Oregon, a guy, and they're like 99% as the original ones were. And so I got them on in 1st of August and decided that the Fly-In Cruise-In was the perfect place to take this car for the first time. It's had 2 modifications to it. They were upgrades. The windows and seat were originally hydraulic powered. The problem was the hydraulic systems leaked, so I upgraded them to electric actuators.
Ed, the engine in this car, a Buick engine?
Yes, correct. Buick had their own line of engines, and 54 was their introduction to their first V8 motor. It was called a nailhead motor. 322 cubic inch 4-barrel. Didn't produce that much horsepower, probably 150 horsepower at the most, and got that name by the alignment of the valves. The valves run straight up and down in the block instead of at an angle.
They didn't make many of these cars, but were they all convertibles?
All of the Skylarks were convertibles. That's the only way they came. And they made, like I said, between 800 and 900 of them. I think exact number maybe 836 of them. There is approximately 400 left in the United States. There's one in Cuba and a couple overseas, but those are the only ones that anybody knows about. And they're pretty well all accounted for. The rest of them were parts cars or got wrecked or scrapped due to the age, and the car rusted out so bad in the north half of the United States due to our salt, they just got scrapped when they got old and rusty and rough. So it's very difficult to find a basic car to start with for a good restoration.
The color of the car, how did you research and find out the original color?
They have a paint code on the cowl. They only made the cars in about 6 or 8 basic colors: red, white, green, light blue, white, black. It was really limited to the colors, but the majority of them were, when they were produced at the factory, they were one color. They weren't two tones. Well, then people started putting on a different color top, and eventually a few people, when they had them in, they two-toned them because it did make them become a little more attractive and less plain. So when I picked this blue out, I knew to begin with I was going to go with a navy top because that was all that was available. I picked out a nice later model navy colored blue for the two-toning.
Interesting is the fact that a lot of old cars had the great big steering wheels, because they didn't have power steering. This one has a big steering wheel, but still power steering.
Correct. It does have a big steering wheel. The power steering works real good. The type of steering they had in the 50s prior to rack and pinion was not the best. When they were brand new, they worked good. When they got 50,000 miles on them, they got loose. Time you got 100,000 or better on them, they wandered around quite a bit.
Was this the most challenging to put together?
It definitely was. I've built a lot of hot rods and restored other cars for other people and myself, and this had to be the toughest car I've ever tackled in my life.
Well, Ed, we want to thank you for attending the Flying Cruise-In. You unveiled it for the first time at the Flying Cruise-In. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the interest you have taken in the car, and I want to thank Jerry Cottle for even mentioning that I ought to call you to get an appointment to bring it out there and maybe possibly display the car.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ed Blinn from Marion, Indiana.